All this to replace a blown fuse. How do I know there is a blown fuse? Because this was not working. Also, I found a blown fuse. Since I have come this far, allow me to introduce the cousins of the fire-breathing dragons, spark plugs. Welcome to the advanced class of spark plugs for beginners. As per too many requests from my subscribers, I am making my first video. This is the book of the Autobots, and here one will find recommended intervals for various maintenance activities which one has to follow religiously. And spark plugs, which I have not followed, primarily because I didn't want to change what came from factory. But in doing so, or not doing so, I am risking my coils. How you may ask? Well, you see, they recommend the change for two reasons. One, when this thing wears out, the distance between the center electrode and the ground electrode increases. Even if that's in fractions of a millimeter, it would still need more voltage for the coil to make the spark jump between the electrodes, thus putting strain on the coil, if you will. Also, when your spark plugs are not sparking right, it means all the fuel in your cylinders are not burnt properly, leading to power loss, starting troubles, misfires, less mileage. So we are going to change plugs. Let's consider a plug here with me, taken out of the bike you saw earlier. And this is the package for the plugs I have put in the bike you saw earlier. They are same with a slight difference. Okay, big difference. NGK is the brand we all know. First letter stands for the thread size of the plug, in this case C, which means 10 millimeters into 1. The R indicates a resistor type spark plug. R is the heat range of this. The higher the number, the colder the heat range. Means for race engines you will need higher numbers, and for normal use in colder weather smaller numbers would be fine. E indicates the reach of the plug, that's the length of the threads, 3/4 inch I guess here. So till here all good, all same. But the last character here stands for the plug feature, K, which means dual ground straps I believe, and the ones I am replacing have IX, meaning iridium. Fancy. But they have only half of the ground electrodes of this. So which is better? Let's see. You see the dual electrodes or the multi-ground electrodes have actually no benefit for combustion because only one spark is produced per ignition event, and that will always occur via the path of least resistance. It's therefore reducing wear on a single electrode. The fine tip of a iridium, not this, needs lesser voltage comparatively to make the spark. And given the fact that iridiums cost more than standard plugs, it has to be better, obviously, in some way, right? That way is the lifespan. Iridium lasts longer than platinum, which lasts longer than copper ones. I am really not a believer of fuel efficiency performance increase from just changing to iridium. If it was, there would not be any other plugs from factory at least. Did I mention iridium sounds fancier than copper plugs? I have measured the gap on the new ones before installing, and they were exactly what was written here they would be, 0.8 millimeters. But what about these? The ones that were removed from the bike at about slightly overshooting the kilometers recommended for change. Well, I have measured them and they are fine within specs. That's why The knowledge here is told to be suggestive maintenance. Think about it. A bike which is used to commute more sits idle at idle speed in traffic without its odometer being incremented, but the spark plugs are still working when the wheels are not. So, inspect the plugs at least at the suggested kilometers. And if you have taken a plug to inspect, replace with a new one. You see, because the second and third cylinder plugs or coils on these models are so tough to get to, it would be actually easier to rebuild an engine with new plugs and put it on the bike as an assembly. Some more tips if you are still watching. Never downgrade the plugs. Means if copper is what came from the factory, you can use platinum or iridium ones. But if iridium is what's come from the factory, stick to it and don't put platinum or copper ones. And whatever you choose, make sure it's original. You will be surprised if you Google fake spark plugs. And the question of if we should use anti-seize on the threads. Well, according to NGK, they tell not to. Why? Because they think adding another lubricant on top of their coating will mess up their torque figures on the threads. That is, if you use a torque wrench, which you should. According to me, I tell not to. Because think of what's in an anti-seize. Here's an example. Copper anti-seize. Copper, the magic yellow metal, has a very high melting point. That's why it's used to make anti-seize. But when you put some on the threads and install to an engine, what really happens there? Over time, with hot cycles of the engine, the carrying agent for the copper either evaporates or melts, somehow vanishes from there, leaving behind copper, which, with more heat from the engine, eventually turns into a powdery form, thereby creating a layer between the plug threads and the engine head wall, preventing them from seizing with each other. That's why they come off easily next time, thus being called anti-seize. But next time you remove the plug easily on a vertically sitting engine with plugs installed with such anti-seize, where does all the powder go? Do they come stuck to the plug? Or will some powder fall through the plug hole onto the piston? If it falls, what happens then? Copper, the magic yellow metal, has a very high melting point. Will not melt. Will it be pushed out in the next exhaust stroke once the engine is fired? What if that pushed copper powder on its way out finds itself a new home on the auto sensors? Still worse, what if some copper remains inside, scratching the cylinder for every stroke? Instead of overthinking so much, avoid anti-seize on threads and don't over-tighten them. Speaking of over-tightening, torque wrenches are great, but the issue is they come in different sizes and ranges. This click type torque wrench is good, but starts only at 10 foot-pounds and goes up to 80 foot-pounds, or 13.6 newton meters all the way to 108.5 newton meters, and fits only 3/4 drives. So I bought this digital type, which has the range from 40 to 200 newton meters. That's a lot. but fits only half-inch ratchets. The solution? Buy motor wrenches or buy the adapters. With these adapters, you can choose any size ratchet you wish to. They also come with swivel heads. But the digital ones have a neat trick to them, the peak function or the trace function. With this, I know in real time how much torque is being applied, which translates to using this to measure torque less than its own rated range. Sometimes my genius knows no bounds. Well, that concludes our plug expedition. Thanks for watching.